very large cost. Now, before I let you go in peace, I was going to discuss a bit more on techniques to reduce dark current. We will see it after lunch if we get time. Overall, this is how the overall design of an image sensor goes by. You identify the number of pixels you are going to design, and that depends on your market as well as your application which you need. Do you know what's the most popular camera in the world? Which is the camera which is, okay, this number might be a bit old. One of the most widely available camera in the world was the optical mouse. Below the optical mouse, what do we have? We have an LED, a light source or a laser light source, but somebody has to take the picture as well. So we had a tiny little 8x8 camera. And that was the one which had most widely used till we started having phones in our camera phone. So if you are making a camera for an optical mouse, you don't need 1,000,000 pixels. If you are making a front camera, you're not going to expect people who are only going to keep a phone till this range. So the focal length is this, it's fixed. Unless somebody has a 2-meter long arm. And most probably you are only trying to take this object. Okay, there's something in the background, but you are trying to take yourself in a good way. So you don't need a very high resolution. But the back one, you never know what my end customer is going to take picture of. So that determines the number of pixels. It also determines what am I going to do with these images. Say I'm making a traffic camera. What does a traffic camera do? It records videos. If I have a 10 megapixel camera, at video it's going to produce a huge, so let's calculate this. 10 megapixel camera, 20 frames per second. How much data will it produce in a day? So I put a traffic camera just outside REC Warangal gates, NIT Warangal gates. We try to take a video of the whole day. How much data will it produce? And each pixel just goes as 1 byte, so 8 bits. And at this point, you should not be doing exact calculation, 24 times 60 times 60. Do a ballpark number. 60 into 60 is 3.6 into 10 to the power 3. So you can easily take it as a 10 power 3 number. So just look at the 10 powers which you have. (10 megapixel, how much? 10 power 4 bits in one day. Gigabits. No, that's not. So he's saying we produce 10 terabyte of data, 60 terabytes a day from one freaking camera. One day. That's not a very good outcome. At this point, you need to think, why do I need a 10 megapixel camera there? Particularly if I'm recording video, we can get away with smaller number of pixels because we don't take stills from the video, right? Video as a continuous motion has a lot of information. So often video cameras, commercial video cameras will have less number of pixels. Have you tried taking a video from your mobile phone and seen how quickly it becomes very large? Have you done a video with your mobile phone? Nobody has ever recorded a video using their mobile phone camera. So if you do a 1 second video, how big is the video in size? Or you don't care, Google provides me enough memory space. So why don't you do one thing? Let's do a second video on your phone and then look at its size, how much it has saved. Some of your phones might already have MPEG compression, but a lot of them will not do live compression. 11 MB for a second. Of course, it depends on resolution. Right? So, but still it's 11 megabyte for a second. For an hour, we're looking at 3,600 into 11. Right? So 44 gigabyte of data, or 440 gigabyte. So this raises the question, if we are having continuous operation, maybe we should be looking at smaller number of pixels. Unless there's an absolute need to look at high resolution. Say, for example, if you're designing a camera for particle physics experiments where you need to, there might be an electron in any one of the seeds. But then you need to provide an equivalent amount of storage. The other issue with high number of pixels is if you're doing video, doing live compression of this high video is quite tricky. So we have MPEG compression, we have JPEG compression of the images and other things. But live for larger video size needs higher computational power. This does not have very high computation power. It has compared to what we used to have earlier, but still compared to the size of sensory data which you are throwing to it, it's not that tricky. So the first question which you need to ask is, what should be the resolution of my sensor? That will determine that together with the size of the sensor. How big do you want my sensor to be? So most of our sensors are quite tiny. But there's at least one application where we make a sensor as big as my body. Not physically, but horizontally. Where do you think we will need a sensor as big as that? All of you have seen such a sensor somewhere at some point of time in your life. Sorry? Go ahead. Yes, but we do put lenses in space, so we could get away with smaller cameras there. Has anyone broken a bone ever? Have you broken any bone in your life? My God, you guys are good people. Yes? X-rays. Now, X-rays don't have very good lenses. Well, there has been a lot of work on lensless X-rays. So generally we do direct excitation of X-rays, which means the X-ray image sensor has to be at least as big as the body to capture the whole body, a digital X-ray image sensor. This is one of the reasons earlier the only digital X-ray we had was the dental X-ray, because here the imaging field is quite small, it's just the teeth. So if people start, that was the first application of image sensors as X-rays. All the cameras which I have taught you, all of them are X-ray sensitive. You can make an X-ray cameras immediately out of that, right? But for large scales, you need something as big as the human body. Now there, life became tricky because wafers are not this big. So what we do is in one full wafer, we just make one camera. And we take multiple these cameras and we tile them together to make a big enough sensor for X-rays. X-ray has to be at least an A4 size big. So the X-ray sensors are also slightly bigger. We have 100 micron or 200 micron size pixels in X-rays than these things. Now these days, unless you are doing fancy design like the kind of designs which we do, most foundries will provide you a pixel design if they do optical. Just like SRAM, they provide you an SRAM design. You just create an array out of it, right? But you still need to design the scanners to access the X horizontal scanners and vertical scanners, something which I will. And then of course you need to do rest of it, aka design the data converter, design the array of color filters. Each sensor is now going to give output. What do you do with the output? You have to extract the color, you have to correct for noise, and finally you have to do some form of image processing. So this is a cursory overview of image sensors. We have covered we started on Saturday, second half of the day, and we have spent Sunday we did a bit, and today half a day. We have covered a lot of fundamental topics on image sensors. In the second half of the day, we will look at some specialized sensors, or we will go on infrared cameras. We will stay away from lab for a few days. Maybe we will go back in the weekend and then finish our pixel exercise which we started. Okay? Any questions? If not, we break for lunch. Yeah. No, the pixel in the camera is literally this big. It's no more than 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter, not even 10 millimeters. It won't be more than 3 by 4 millimeter by 4 millimeter. What you see is a sensor with the lens. Okay? The sensor is on the motherboard. Okay, I will try to see if I'm traveling, because generally I travel with some of my camera pixels. But I don't do that when I do international flights, because it has happened when they have seen these camera sensors. The camera sensors literally look the same size as this with the lens operated, and customs people often get confused. Why are you carrying these strange looking sensors with you in your bag? So if I'm carrying some, I'll bring it to you in the second half. Okay. Good. Any other questions? If not, we will try to print these as well as a tutorial exercise sheet, which I will give it to you as homework. Actually, you know what? You all have written down the address of that page. Please note down the web page. I will upload some exercises today there, and we will deal with these exercises sessions, because I can continue giving lectures after lectures and the brain will exponentially start sleeping. Okay? So please note that down. I will be uploading some tutorials there, and we will do the tutorials in the second half as well. Okay? Your call. 2:30? That should be enough? Good. And ventured into the job of predicting people's future, I might make more money than as a professor. Agreed? No? You know, there are all these people who go on television and predict your future, or today's this tithi, all those who have got Shanira, Singh Rasi will make money and others will die. Those kind of predictions make loads of money, doesn't it? Generally, there are two types of predictions people do. One is quantitative, when you're looking at a number. Okay? So the quantitative prediction I can make is something like number of AI and sensing engineers is going to be X. And let me make this clear to you, AI does not exist without sensing. It needs data. Who gives data to it? I mean, the entire deep learning started because cameras were made and they were giving data to the camera for training. So all image processing started because we could make low-end cameras. Okay? So AI will not exist without our ability to sense the world. So that will be the quantitative information, how many AI engineers we will need. The qualitative information, of course, could be AI is going to kill all of our jobs, so we'll be jobless. So while doing engineering, you guys should also learn how to do farming. Maybe farming will be something which we can still have money. Now, historically, we are bad predictors of trend. We have often assumed this is going to be the next big thing, and now we are thinking AI is the current big thing, and that's going to be the next, that's going to rule the engineering world for future. I was going to say historically we have been very bad predictors, and if you don't believe me, I'll give you some examples. Mr. Einstein predicted that there is not the slightest indication that nuclear energy will ever be obtainable. Lord Kelvin, the Kelvin temperature scale, or the thermal effects predicted heavier than air flying machines are impossible. And this is one of my favorite, wherein King William I of Prussia, or which is current day Germany, said when the trains were coming for the first time, as to why will you buy a train ticket to travel in 1 hour when you can go on a horseback, not pay at all, enjoy the route, and the horse just eats the grass. You don't have to pay anything. Why will anyone buy a train ticket to go anywhere? Natural, it looked logical for their times. Nuclear energy did not look feasible. So these might look like old predictions. Let's look at some of the new predictions and see if they make sense to you. Ken Olsen in 1977 predicted, who was the head of DEC, one of the largest computer makers of its time, that nobody will ever need a personal computer. This is even better. Thomas Watson said, there's a market for 5 computers in the world. These are the days when they were making big computers. And of course, my favorite, Mr. Gates, he promised that he's going to get rid of all spam in next 2 years. Are we still getting spam? Do you still get messages from Nigeria, people willing to give you lots of their money? That their husband who is dead leaving loads of money and you are the only person who can save them? Now, that's the fun prediction. Let's look at the scientific prediction which went wrong. Stem cell, flexible electronics. Well, we have predicted it will exist, should have been there by now. We are still fixed electronics. We don't have foldable electronics. 10 years ago, they were saying bioethanol is where all the cars will run. Right? I put the word neural network there because neural networks have been predicted to solve every problem about 5 times in our history. When I was starting my doctorate in 2002, they were dying. ANN had died. People predicted too much and they didn't solve anything. Some of you who are older might remember Buckminster Fuller. This was fullerene. These were balls of zinc and carbon atom. And they were predicted to be the wonder material which is going to change everything. Then people came with a tube of carbon atom called carbon nanotube, and that was going to change everything. And then we had one-dimensional sheet of carbon atom, graphene, which was going to change everything. None of these clicked. And maybe it will click in future, but right now we are still doing silicon. Then you had gene therapy. By now we should have had gene therapy to treat all our diseases. In 1980s, we had this other big word, high temperature superconductivity. So we know superconductivity exists at low temperature, right? 4 Kelvin, I think. If we had a superconductor which exists at room temperature, we would get rid of all the heat losses. And that would be really a wonderful electrical device. But it never clicked. Geopolitically speaking, people predicted the future would be like Soviet Union. Now, the spectrum, IEEE spectrum, some of you might have seen. This is the magazine of Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering. Every few years, it tries to come up with what the future is going to be. Right? So this is from one of its earlier editions when they were predicting what will happen in technology forecasts. And IEEE spectrum basically asks a lot of electrical engineers to come up with what will happen. Right? And this is interesting. So this is based on the 3 years. They have said in 1982, we would have fault-tolerant, long-lived computer system modules. We still don't have fault-tolerant computer modules. Intelligent CRT terminals. Does anyone remember CRT terminals? The big cathode ray tube terminals. They thought they would have become intelligent by that. Now they are dead. The one thing which did work was electronic office files and communication. Remember, we are talking early 1980s. That's what their predictions were. They thought by 85 to 87, we would have had human-computer terminals connected to telephone communications. No one was thinking of wireless communication. At least people were thinking, but it was not in market. Computer optimization aid for computers, consumers, and computer-controlled artificial organs. But the best was between 1988 and 1990. They thought in 10 years from now, we will have practical voice-operated typewriters. Despite sitting in the top of IEEE, we could not imagine that typewriters will be gone. Some of you might have never seen a typewriter now. Do you remember typewriters? So we were thinking that they will be automated rather than personal computer coming into play. So all of this history is to tell not to believe my prediction. People bigger than me, better than me have made predictions, which leads to some laws of prediction. Have you guys read Arthur C. Clarke? You have never read a science fiction author, Arthur C. Clarke? 2001: A Space Odyssey. If not, I will highly recommend you guys to read Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov, the two science-driven science fiction authors. Clarke predicted the existence of satellites way back between the wars. So Arthur C. Clarke has these 3 laws about predictions. The first law states, when a distinguished but elderly scientist says something is possible, he's almost certainly right. Now, you know there's a but coming, right? When he says something is impossible, he's most probably wrong. That's the first law. Then there is second law, and as usual, all the second laws are problematic. Newton's second law, the second law of thermodynamics, they are both problematic laws. The second law of Arthur C. Clarke says the only way to discover the limits of what is possible is to venture a little way past impossible. And third is again interesting. If you bring any sufficiently advanced technology, people will find it indistinguishable from magic or even from God. So if somebody walks with a mobile phone in 1910, they will think he's a magician, right? You can look at somebody on your own hand. And we used to have these stories of sages meditating and having a conversation with sages somewhere else. We don't need to meditate, we just need to dial a button now. So all of this would be counted as magic had it been many, many years ago. Okay? So if you are an engineering student, we are not studying engineering today. Good. There's a reason I'm going to do all of this. This is 1961 edition of Popular Mechanics, which predicted that we would have helicopters. Why won't we? We all have cars now, right? In 1900s, cars were still very costly. Only few people could afford cars. Now everyone is affording a car. So quite naturally, the line of direction would have been, let's move from cars to helicopters. So we could have a helicopter in our garage. Now, this is interesting. Do you know a company called Goodyear? The tire company, right? They tried to bring this product in the market. What's the product here? They're making cars, tires, right? So they tried to design a tire where you can change the color of the tire. What's the color of tires we buy? Black. They thought, if we are changing everything, we are changing the color of the car, we are changing our dress, why would we not be interested in changing the color of our tire? So this was an electronically changeable color of the tire. It has LEDs, buttons around it. Works perfectly fine. But nobody bought it. Then, of course, we have been predicting that we will go and live on Mars forever and ever, or going to live on Moon, and this is just still in future. We thought we will have become bionics by now. We would have all those sorts of bionics addition. And there are a few things which we predict but never work. So one of the cool things of our times are self-driven cars. How old do you think? When was the first self-driven car shown? Actually, let me give you the news item. So that's the news item which says you reach over to your dashboard, push the button marked electronic drive. Selecting your lane, you settle back to enjoy the ride as your car adjusts itself to the prescribed speed. You may prefer to read or carry on conversation with your passenger or even to catch up on news. It makes no difference for next several 100,000 miles. The future was successfully illustrated by RCA in state of Nebraska on October the 10th. And now it's your work to guess which year this news item from. 2003 is one year I have. Do I have another year? When do you think this news item came out? So 2003 certainly is wrong. 2016, still very wrong. Let me give you another hint. That's the picture. Now guess the year. All of a sudden it went straight into 1900s, right? Black and white. Color TV is not there. And the car was demonstrated. So 1957, we already had self-driven cars, or at least the concept car was shown. So quite often, technologies which are there in the market right now do not make it immediately, neural networks being one of them. Deep learning is now making some impact, but it has been there for quite, actually, most of deep learning has been there from 1980s. Convolutional neural network were there, I think, in 89. It's only now they're making a gap. Okay, on the same flux, let's do another exercise. 3D TV. When do you think they came up? 3D, you have seen 3D movies, right? With the different color glasses have been to. So which year do you think they made their mark? Any guesses? Now he's going, you know what? I will go backwards anyway. It has to be old. Any other dates? Any of the newcomers? When do you think 3D TV was first showcased? It was patented in 1936. Here's a gentleman. He had 2 television screens attached with 2 aerials onto him. Hugo Ganspa. And he made it in 1963. He made it working in 1963. So my first 16 minutes I spent talking that predictions are difficult, particularly with technology predictions. But we still love doing this. Part of it is for science fiction. Part of it is, it generally translates our current understanding of technology. So how many of you have seen Terminator movies? All the 3 of them or just one of them? All 3. There's one person. It's a very interesting take on the movie because the Terminator, the technology behind Terminator keeps on changing with each movie incidence. In one movie, he's based on nanotechnology because nanotechnology was the cool buzzword that time. In the next one, he becomes new material kind of thing. And then there is, of course, an artificial intelligence based on this. So whatever science fiction movies are there, they generally reflect our current understanding of what future might be. But nevertheless, they help us understand the effect of technology on society. Most of the time, they entertain us, but they're also used to frighten us. And the big fright is right now, AI is going to eat all our jobs. The only people who will be left after AI are the sensors engineers. Because you can make the best neural network in the world, you still need to collect data and do something with it. So there is a line of thought that maybe there should be a new field of engineering which should evolve, the sensors engineering. So from the last 2 days, we were looking at optical data. For the next 4 days, each day we are going to look at one different sensing modality. So one day we will look at mass, which will be very mechanical engineer. Next day we will look at chemicals, which will be very chemical engineering. And so the broad spectrum of things which we need to see maybe suggest there's a new thing there. So one job fear which we have is AI is going to take all our jobs. The other fear, of course, we have is going to rule us. And do you think it will rule us? What's the consensus in the crowd? Negative or positive? Do you think AI will rule us or AI should rule us? Sorry? It will rule us. Well, considering some of the politicians we have, AI may not be the worst ruler. Right? So, what I wanted to do was we did quite a lot of heavy lifting in the morning. So, let's have a fun session on what the future of engineering holds for us. To do that, I'll be looking at 3 different aspects of our society: engineering, computation, education, communication, and also a bit on the society, because all of these are correlated with one another. So in next 1 hour, I'm going to do a history of world lecture to you guys. We'll cover the entire history of world and do the most boring subject which we hated in our class 10th courses, right? Is there any engineer here who loved history as a subject? One person. That was just a hand raise. I'm going to raise my hand just to annoy you, isn't it? Really loved? When was the second battle of Panipat fought? Oh gosh, somebody's preparing for his civil services examinations. Well done, son. Well, I have no idea whether your answer is right or wrong. There was a point of time when I remembered all of these battles, but so the question then is, what's the role of education? Historically, the role of education has been to train personnel for activities needed by the society. And that's why we train engineers, right? Because the society needs to build things. We need to make machines, so we train you guys to build this thing. Okay. Which then raises the question, what is an engineer? All of you are engineers, right? What's an engineer? So if you ask in Europe, the answer to this question is, an engineer is this: somebody wearing a hard hat and doing some construction work. If you ask in India, the engineer is somebody doing this, sitting in a computer cluster and doing some form of coding. If you ask our parents, engineer is somebody who brings this, right? Now, if you ask a historian what is history of engineering, they will try to talk about these things: pyramids, first steam engine, Colosseum, and all those kind of things, historical buildings. So I will argue that history of engineering starts with this: fire, wheel. That's the first form of engineering. Agreed? All of the engineers says, yes, we agree. Now, where does the word engineer comes from? Anyone? Guys, if you have to have conversation, you can have it outside. Okay? So where does the word engineer comes from? All of you are engineers here, right? Or you're studying to be an engineer. So where does the word engineer comes from? Latin. Of course it comes from Latin, but which word? So the word comes from ingenium, which translates as innate talent or natural capacity. It's also the word which is the origin of genius. So genius and engineer have got the same mother word and its origin. Now, originally we were all military. Well, the original engineer was a military engineer. Our job was to go and destroy a building or destroy a bridge. And that's why we are making things like battering rams, defensive formation, that kind of stuff. And then comes the birth of the engineer who was not a military engineer, was not working for military. And that engineer becomes civil engineer, the mother of all of our engineering. We all are civil engineers. Okay? At this point, your parents will be, no. We wanted our students to be electronics or electrical engineer. There's not enough money in civil engineering. So Bishop Gundulf would be counted as one of the first engineers in England. He's also considered the father of royal engineers, and he made the castle of Colchester. So somebody who made engineering as a profession. Now, as a trade, we are very new compared to all other fields. The first professor of engineering in UK was only established in 1840, despite we have been there for a long period of time, because we were tradesmen, we were mechanics, carpenters, blacksmiths. Okay? And even if you look at the rest of the world, when early institutions were established, nothing is beyond before 17th century, even though sciences were taught in virtually every university prior to that. Engineering didn't happen much frequently. So history of engineering is unlike political or scientific history. I started this question on day one. I asked you guys to name 5 famous engineers, and none of you could. So I have now given 3 famous engineers. Let's see if you can name what did they invent. Frank Whittle, Jack Kilby, and Karl-Heinz Brandenburg. And I can bet you all of you are using their products, or you have used their inventions. So what did these guys make? Steam engine. Nah, we are not going that old. That would be James Watt and Kelvin and those 3. Shoes. Did it say? Nope. So Frank Whittle discovered the jet engine. Jack Kilby got the Nobel Prize for integrating a large number of transistors on a chip. And my ex-colleague Brandenburg came up with the MP3 codec. It's funny, wherein despite the fact all of you have used this thing, you don't know the names of the inventors. Okay, so let's do a bit of history of engineering or history of humanity. And let's look at what has happened to computation and communication specifically, because what we're now looking at is what's the next stage of computation and communication. Okay? So let's cover the whole world's history very quickly. If we start with Industry 0.0 or World 0.0, that aspect of human civilization is as old as humanity itself. And there are few common trends I will be taking in the entire pattern. What were the tools we were making? Our tools were simple. They were hunting and farming tools. Right? And virtually everyone was an engineer. Everyone is a household engineer. What's the force we have? What's the source of energy we have? Our own hands. We haven't come up with electrical energy or steam energy. That's the only force we have. Where do we live as a society? We live in villages or in caves. But there's something very interesting about this society. It's gender neutral. Men and women are fairly equal because, well, we both have to work in the field or hunt. So the gender ratios, the gender separation hasn't happened yet. The only currency you have is your strength, how strong you are. If you can beat the hell out of the other person, you're powerful. And of course, in due course of time, we start having land, gold, or weapons as your strength. Now, what do you do of education? Well, you mostly learn in your family the trade of your art craft. There are no concept of schools because only few people need to be able to read and write. We have these priests and royal family who needs to be able to read and write. And the only way we are writing is we're writing on stone edicts for our future generation. What's happening to electronics at this point of time? Somebody's shaking head, nah, nothing happening. Well, it depends upon how you define electronics. We had invented the number system then, and we started counting. That's the mother of all computation, isn't it? What's happening to communication? It's fairly local. As far as I can shout, that's the place my communication is going. And you can see how I'm weaving the world history into what we do very regularly. There's another thing which happens with communication, which is security and privacy. We spend a lot of time encrypting our data. Now, in this part of our human history, virtually it's guaranteed. If you can't hear me, you don't know me. Okay? We lived like that for about 18, long period of time. Okay, we had wars, kings and queens and all that. But it's immaterial for human growth. The next change for human growth, I would like to argue, happens when factory comes in being. Because this is at the turn of 18th century. So I would suggest everything before that was the Dark Ages. Okay? So the turn of 18th century, we have industrial revolution in many countries. And rather than just hands as the force, we start using water and steam power as the force. And we started mechanization. Another thing which we do, we started doing division of labor. So I do this particular job, somebody else does that particular. So earlier, everybody was a blacksmith. If you wanted to make something in your house, you were kind of an engineer. Now we start specializing. I'm a farmer, I'm a dentist, I'm a so on and so forth. So start dividing the labors needed to run the society. What happens to society? We start giving birth to cities. People move from being a farmer to becoming a mill worker. They're working in certain mills. Something interesting happens to gender at this point of time. Remember I told you men and women were fairly equal in the previous stage. Now because we have moved to these cities, men are going to work, women are working in their household, and women lose their power. Because incidentally, if you don't have financial wealth, you're losing your control over the society. Now, generally speaking, the society also starts dividing between rich people and poor people. And workers are generally worse off. Those with capital start collecting more and more capital. In between, what happens is we get a new class of people being born. So earlier we had the royalty and the peasant. There was kings and everybody else was farmer. Now we have a new class we call the middle class, which is coming up. So you can't become a king, but you can that could be a stepping stone to become fairly rich. We start having specialized schools coming up now. That's my alma mater, Oxford, where you start having new type of degrees, trivium, wherein you study logic, grammar, and rhetoric. Or if you are even more interested, you also go and study music, arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy. Well, you study all of them to get a bachelor's degree. Here you are just studying electronics engineering and you are crying on that. What happens to electronics at this stage? We start making mechanical devices. Okay? The one big discovery happens is that of logarithm. Multiplication was quite challenging before that. Long multiplication. So log comes in, and then many people start making mechanical devices which use logarithm to do multiplication. So that's Pascaline, the first one, and then you have got lots of Napier-Bones and many other things which utilize logarithm to do hard and fast computation. From a communication system point of view, we gave birth to the postal system. Now we can write letters to far off people. And security and privacy gets lost to some extent because we're living in condensed cities now. We don't have our own big houses, so people can know what's happening. It is also regained by law sometimes because some laws came in UK which basically forbid people to read gentlemen's letters. And then of course it was lost again. Let's go to what's happened at the turn of the century, early 20th century. Henry Ford comes up with his idea of assembly line production. So rather than making one factory, each person works in certain, each product moves through. So if I have to make a car, we'll have one person who is just making a chassis, the other person is just bolting and doing nothing else. And we have assembly line production going up and up. And now we are becoming more and more specialized. Our generalization is being lost. Earlier, if all I had to do was hit and hammer, everybody could hit and hammer. But now I'm becoming just I can screw, nothing else. The society becomes even more urban. The cities start growing to become much, much bigger. Not only that, we now start having industrially powerful cities, things like Manchester in UK, cities which were around industries. So earlier, virtually every place was similarish. We start having a better transportation system, so we start being connected to one another. Society in general is richer. We cannot say much about what happened to privacy and security because there were too many wars going on in this time, at least in Europe. We had World War I, we had World War II, virtually everyone was involved, so privacy and security took a battering. Something happens in the education sector. This is a time when we start making universal education. Everyone should read. Everyone should go to schools. And we also come up with the concept of Humboldtian University. Your institute is an example of Humboldtian University. The idea that university professors should not only just teach, but they should do research in their field starts coming into the place. And we get more and more specialized schools coming up in this thing. Gender-wise, women start working again, but they actually start working at the lower tier of economy as typists or as school teachers. They're not becoming board members or senior engineers because again, we expect something from our female folks. Electronics-wise, we do something really brilliant. We come up with vacuum tubes and vacuum triodes, and we can start making computational machines. The first large computing machines come in picture, things like ENIAC or ETIAC. Okay? Now we will do two big changes of society which happened last century. So mid-20th century, we come up with the personal computer, and we start digitizing everything. And that's the first fear people have of computers. Computers are going to take over. All the jobs will be lost because computers will do everything. So in 50s, there was a lot of work on what will happen to future. How will we earn our bread and butter if computers take over everything? The factory workers start losing their job because the factories start becoming automated. A normal car production factory will have far less number of people working now than they had working roughly a year ago. And we start getting new type of workers, workers who work on computers. Now what happens to the society? We had rapid changes in technology. We also had rapid changes in transportation. People are moving. Earlier, only royalty could move from one country to another country, or from one state to another state. In India, we used to have this concept of Char Dham. If you're elderly, you go on walking to the 4 holy sites, and with the family hoping half of you will be dead by the time you come back. And if you do come back, then you are the holiest man in the village because you have been to all these 4 holy sites. Now, virtually, how many people are going to Kumbh? Any one of you have tried going to the Kumbh Mela? None of you want to wash out your sins? You're happy with your existence? But you can see how people are able to travel, and we have made a bit more connected world. So our quantity and quality of life both improve significantly at this time. Now we have rapid advances in education, but we do something very silly at this point of time for education. We make very rigid structures. You have 12 to 14 years of school where everybody learns exactly the same thing. And then 3 to 6 years of university where you specialize in one thing. And what we say is, okay, son or daughter, you learn it for 6 years and then you're set for your life. Go and do the same thing for the rest of your life. Okay? So you train as a mechanical engineer, you're going to make cars for the rest of your life. Train as an electrical engineer, you're going to fix power grid for the rest of your life. So this is where we are right now. Now you have seen the history of the world. Of course, now we can say which direction we are going in. So Industry 4.0 is upon us. Till 3.0 we got people-to-people communication. We had SIM cards, mobile phones, computer nets, and so on and so forth. Now we are having machine-to-machine communication, machine-to-human communication. There's quite a lot of work going on. So we have got a lot of connected systems. We have a lot of connected people. We are getting connected to people whom we will never meet in our life, courtesy social media. And in parallel, we have artificial intelligence resurgence, which is then asking the question, are there going to be new jobs? What will happen to society? Is our current model wherein you study for 3 years in university or 6 years in university and be set for your life? That's already changing, right? I mean, I started my first year of engineering here. I had to learn a computer language called Pascal. In second year, the computer science department said, oh, hold a second, nobody is using Pascal. So they got C. And by third year, it was already C++. And by the time we were giving job interviews, people were talking about Java. And now all the 3 languages which I talked to you about are already dead. So what language people are looking for most these days? Oh gosh, that's not even a proper programming language, but fine. Python or AI-related stuff. Okay? Which means what? See. Which means all those people who were taught in C and C++ had to retrain themselves. Which then raises the question, is this model correct of education in the first part of your life and then work for the rest of your life? We need to revisit this model. It's very difficult to predict future of technology, but some trends are already visible. We are doing more and more connectivity. We are having more and more data. We are doing a lot of automation in our society. And this is where things are very tricky. Earlier, we went from centralized processing to distributed processing. And now we are going back to centralized processing. So we went from large computers to individual personal computers. And now we are going back to large data centers and all our mobile phones just being end terminals. So you're doing a full loop in communications structures. This you guys already know. You know that graph? Few people know. Where does that graph comes from? Yes, no? That's from Gordon Moore's original paper, which he talks about Moore's, well, he makes his prediction that the number of transistors will double every 18 months. And he thought it will run till about 1975. You know, more and more transistors on a chip, the Moore's law, what we call. And that has been running fairly okay even till now. We are still putting more and more transistors on a chip. There are few problems which we have encountered over the years. We have converted entire world into a 2D world. Our screens, our printers, our mobile phones, our chips, they are all 2D examples, whereas the rest of the world had continued to be three-dimensional. And that's something we are not seems to be changing anytime future either. We thought we were mimicking nature in terms of making neural networks, and we'll see very soon how we are not. One thing which is certainly happening is we started with integrating processor on a chip. So we wanted the chip to be more and more processing. Then we added more and more memory to the same chip. So we have processor with large amount of cache memory. How much cache do you guys have on your processor? You all have a processor with you, right? So have you looked at how much cache do you? Why don't you do a Google search now and tell me how much cache memory is there? Sorry? Well, I'm sure you have two different type of cache, a level 1 cache and level 2 cache on your processor. So we have been integrating memory. So the next thing to integrate would be sensory operations. The last 3 days we saw how to integrate optics on the chip. We use the same transistor and diode to make optical cameras. The next stage will be integrating non-optical things on the chip. Things like chemical sensors, things like mechanical, and sources of power. We'll be looking forward to integrating batteries or things like that. What is happening to connectivity? Now, this is an interesting story. In the last century or so, we started with a one-way controlled communication. We had the television, Doordarshan. The government controlled what you need to see. So it was one way. So everything from one way to the other side. Then we went to one-way free. People started having their own radio station. They started printing their own newspapers. Okay. We started two-way, but one-to-one, telephone. So two-way communication, one-to-one person. We also had two-way, but one-to-many. So one side to many people. So blogs and those kind of things. Now we are having kind of two-way many-to-many communication. Many people are communicating with many people. One of the thought process we had was when many people will be communicating with many people, the world will become a better place to live. We will appreciate why you do things your way, and you will appreciate the vice versa. For example, I will finally understand why NIT Warangal hostels have 5 different types of water. Rasam, sambar, curry, yogurt, and water, which I still don't understand. And you will finally understand why every dish ever made in Warangal is spicy by my taste buds. And someday they will make things which I can eat other than the curd. But unfortunately, that's not seems to be happening. What has happened is rather than appreciating other people's viewpoint, we all have started listening to our own viewpoints. So we've started coalescing around people who have got similar viewpoints as us. And we are not becoming liberal. Rather, we have got extremism of all kinds which are propping up and down the corner. And the extremism is also having quite far ending. So earlier when we had extremism in one part of Europe or one part of the world, it was very localized extremism. Now extremism can very easily diversify to many other parts of the world. And this is another problem which we have, particularly with sensors. We are producing a huge amount of data. How many pictures do you guys have? Did you guys went back and looked at it? Did anyone check how many photographs they have recorded over their lifetime? No, we can't even check that. So which means all of us are becoming data producers, but we're not consuming the data in any way. We're not extracting information out of this data. So a lot of this data which we are producing is either being lost or being left unutilized at all, sitting somewhere on your mobile phones or sitting on your Google Drive. And you're also giving copyright of your data to other agencies which might be doing some sort of data mining, but you yourself are not using this huge amount of data which you have produced. Now here lies a problem for us. We have too much of data. So what we end up doing is we have very limited processing capabilities. We as humans are not trained to access this much data. Our brains do a selective data filtering. The moment we see something, we ignore half of it. So there's a theory called cortical prediction, and you might try this theory today. Let me pick somebody. The gentleman in the end, the third gentleman next to you. We'll come back to you as well. Can you tell us, do you live in college institute accommodation? Can you tell us what exactly is there in your room? So, there's this very, sorry, I didn't want you to ask personal question to you. We have a memory map of what's in our room. And as you open the doors to your room, if everything is according to that, your brain stops firing. It doesn't do anything. It only does something when something is not at its place, or something has been lost, or something is not there. So the prediction theory says that every time we do something, our brain predicts what am I going to see. And if I see something different, then I make some action, or then my brain starts firing. So what is happening now is we're using quite a lot of selective use of data. We are picking our own data to choose from. Now, as long as we are doing that's fine. The problem happens when government starts doing it, or firms start doing it. They start using selective use of data. So this will put me in a lot of trouble because this is being live telecasted. There's a new ChatGPT kind service which has come from China. Have you guys tried it? Yes? Have you tried asking it some questions? Try asking which country owns Arunachal Pradesh. So I come from Arunachal Pradesh, right? So for a long point of time, our neighbor was very hesitant in issuing visa to us because according to them, I'm a Chinese national. I mean, I don't know by which angle I'm Chinese, but because I'm from that part of India, I am a Chinese national. And you can see there are even trained models. I mean, there was a good paper, good article published the other day which talked about things like, it doesn't, the model doesn't want to talk anything about its own government. So it's happy to tell you about the Indian prime ministers and their fallacies, but will not tell you anything about the premiers of that country. So even though we thought we could make AI data blind, we can actually make it, force it to be very intelligent, yet on selective data. The other problem which we have is AI is actually quite bad for most of the training data which has gone into making AI generally comes from Western world, aka men of the Western world, so white men. So AI has been slowly seen to be quite biased against women and biased against people of color. And if you are people of color and you are women, you better go and do farming. That's what the AI is saying. You don't exist. Of course, with due course of time, it will be trained with more data. But as it exists, we have got a problem here. The other issue which we will be facing is how do we write the history of our times? Earlier, the only people who used to write books were big people, or authors, or politicians used to give speeches. We used to record the speeches. Now everyone is giving a speech. So 500 years from now, or 1,000 years from now, if somebody wants to know what happened in 2025, he will have everyone from Trump to me, my video recorded lectures. I mean, who knows, I might become important 2,000 years from now. It has happened in history. What's the most famous mummy? No, the Egyptian mummies. Which one do you know about? Tutankhamun? Have you heard of Tutankhamun? No? So this is a very interesting thing happened in Egyptian history, wherein This mummy was I think was discovered in late 19th century with all the gold and jewelry and everything. All of the pyramids were empty because people had already taken things out of the raiders had already taken everything out. So nobody knew about Egyptian history, or the modern historians did not have anything to know. This was the very small non-pyramid burial ground which no one had touched. And this is why this guy, who died within 6 months of being a king and was never written in Egyptian history, all of a sudden becomes the most important Egyptian pharaoh because his mummy is the one which everyone sees. And it's shown everywhere else in the world. So it's possible we would have change in history. The other thing which we need to be worried about is security and privacy of our data. Now, all of you guys, those who are students here, I saw the other day when you leave the institution, you leave your fingerprint. And when you come back, you have to do your fingerprint again. So someone is recording has got your daily database of fingerprints for a long period of time. Now, one hopes the institute is nice to you. Is that nice to you? Sorry? It is being live telecasted, so you can be truthful. So one hopes this data does not fall into bad hands. But centralized storage of any data is always problematic. If you have the best locks in the world, most probably you're fine. But what if somebody breaks those locks? No computer scientist can ever claim that my data is completely secure. And our life has become very distributed now. So the questions like, should we start worrying about the own data which we produce? Who owns our data? What happens to us, to our emails after we die? Start becoming interesting questions which none of our forefathers had to think about. Because once you die, except for your house and property, your thought process dies with you. Now our thought process goes on living. All the nasty emails which I have written to my students will continue to be there even after I'm gone, and vice versa. What's happening to the factory? So most factory jobs will be lost. Anything which can be automated will be automated. So when you guys go out of this building, you can say to all civil, mechanical, chemical, metallurgical engineers, start planning for something else. No? Now I see something very interesting happen in the past. We used to have single site factories. So if you have one factory where you have trained your staff workers to make steel, moving the factory was very difficult. Because if you move the factory, for whatever reason, worker strike or worker rights, you have to go back and retrain people there. And this is why workers had quite a lot of right. They knew the owners cannot afford to close or shut down the factory. Now is not the case with our engineering. Right? A lot of factory work moved from US to India because we were cheap. Let's be honest about it. It's not because we had the best engineers in the world. Maybe we had hard-working engineers, but we were cheap. What if somebody is cheaper than us? Tomorrow Congo comes up. Central Africa starts producing engineers. What will happen to all the jobs in Bangalore and Hyderabad? And what's our backup for all these jobs lost? Well, one option, of course, would be we all move to Central Africa. Right? So, same with all the factories. We moved from US to Mexico, India. If from here they move again, we do not have the social security net to cater to that. And this has led to a different problem. So this shift of factories was good for some countries. It was good for India, good for China. It was bad for some countries. Bad for US, bad for Europe, because at the end of the day, their job moved here. Some of it. Of course, we added to it. Earlier in the same money, we could only recruit one factory worker. Now you can have 10 factory workers in India, and hopefully you can increase your productivity. But then this raises question about market. And you can see how people are raising question about market. In 70s, 80s and 90s, we were thinking global market, the more open you make, the more better we would be. But now you can see what's happening in US. They're putting barriers. So whatever openness we had, it will change our society. Very soon we will start putting barriers to our own openness. So moving between places will be tricky. Heck, for that matter, they might just say, Warangal becomes a country of its own because we have the best, whatever we have the best here. Nobody else should be able to use it. And then this raises the question, people might start questioning technology itself. So the future, despite that linear growth, we might recede because of this. This is the last question which I'm going to ask you guys. What do you think will happen of cities? Will cities survive? Because right now, why are there cities? We don't have factories in the cities, and Bangalore doesn't have a single. I mean, any factory in Bangalore can be anywhere else in the world. Agreed? Or most of the data job in Hyderabad could be in Kurnool, Kadapa, or any village in Andhra. And slowly that dissemination is happening. People are working from home. So will cities survive? Or will we be all going back to villages? At this time you are saying, sir, enough sociology lecture for one day. Please bring the equations back. We would live with equations. Okay, just few more work and then we'll go back to studying and this thing. The other thing which is happening now is people are living longer. Okay, because we have got better biomedical products, we have better technology to support us. But at the same time, can the society afford for people to live longer? So a number of people in my previous generation, they worked for 30 years or 40 years. They started working at 25, retired at 60. That's 35 years of working. And they're living till about 90. They worked for 30 years and they're taking pension for 30 years. Who pays for their pension? The current day working people, right? Can we afford the same population to be on pension, not working? Do we raise enough capital? More so, the same part of the society is also costing a lot in terms of healthcare benefits. They have major diseases which cost. I'm not saying we should get rid of all of our old people, don't get me wrong. But we need to think carefully about how do we continue working. The last but least, I think our current model of primary, secondary and university education will very soon collapse. Maybe not in my lifetime, but immediately after that. We will stop this assumption that you learn for a few years and then you go and work for the rest of your life. Already people are self-training themselves. You're going to courses afterwards. I think what should happen now is you do 1 year of university, go back and work, come back after 5 years, do another year of university, go back and work and come back after every 5 years to re-skill yourself. The whole idea of skilling once is not necessarily going to play a role. The other bigger issue which we need to think about is technology is moving at a pace wherein my grandfather could use that kind of phone. Can you guys use that kind of phone? The one which went, have you seen that? We are using these kind of phones. And we think we are quite technologically savvy. But as our last generation has shown, something which comes new is very tricky to learn. I'm sure you have family members in your family who come and ask you something is not happening on the phone. And at this age, you might fix all the problem. But very soon, you will be in that age when you will not be able to appreciate what's happening. And to show that, let's see if I can see a video. You can't hear the sound, can you?
langt kom jeg også.
Okay.
Men så stoppet det opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte å gå videre.
Ja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner at inni her, så ligger det kanskje flere hundre sider med lagret tekst. Så kommer vi videre, så tar du tak i et ark på den måten her, og så lar du over på neste side sånn. Da fortsetter teksten her.
And maybe I need to run this video for my students anyway. They don't know what books are.
Men når jeg skal tilbake da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen. Ta tak der. Og så der. Så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde sagt.
Ok, så den slutter der, og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte for dagen, hva gjør jeg da?
Ja, bare slår du sammen permene.
Ja?
På den måten der. Sånn. Da er lukket der, ligger alt lagret inni der.
Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her nå.
Nei, alt ligger lagret inni her nå. Ja. I tilfelle setter fyr på hele greia, det er kanskje litt sannsynlig.
Ja, ok. Nei, for det er noe med det at når du har holdt på med skriftruller, så tar det litt grann tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Ja, ja, men du, før du går, du bare gå gjennom en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner sånn, og så, hva har du kalt det? Jeg blar frem og tilbake, og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den. Flott, kjempefint. Ja, men du, vent, ikke sant? Nå er den sånn igjen, nå får jeg ikke åpnet den.
Du har fra feil side. Du har åpnet fra andre siden.
Så det er ikke likegyldig, det altså?
Åpne fra den siden der, så der nå.
Ja vel.
Har du lest manualen, eller?
Manualen?
Jeg skal følge med som manualen som brukerveiledning.
Ja, den ja. Ja, men ikke sant, der har du samme problemet. Får det godt.
So moral of the story is, technology which might look very easy, may not be very easy for your end customer. Certainly will not be easy for the upper Acleans. We'll stop here, take a break for 5 minutes, and then we'll get back to computers and start working on neural networks. Any questions on history of computing? No questions whatsoever. Release us from this jail. Goody. Let's take a 5-minute breather, and then we'll come back.